Jamal was very intentional about the way that he attacked different defenders. Gotta screen this guy off of me and use my quickness advantage.
That Warriors game was one of the first times all season where I'm like, please get Russ back in the game. Like, I was like, get him back in the game right now. His passing was unbelievable. I was proud that they were resilient enough to sustain it through 48 minutes. And because so often, Grace, it's a lack of effort.
Were you more encouraged against OKC or discouraged that the bench were such negatives against the South Bay Lakers?
Nuggets fans have been searching for that playoff lineup all season long. Is this it? Like, is this the lineup?
But we really struggle to guard teams that have these multiple quick decision makers. That's what those three guys are.
I can't believe I have Austin Reaves in the same conversation as those. It makes me sick. It makes me
I'm sick right now listening to it. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean, here with our special guest, Sports Shorts. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Grace.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on the show. Will and I have both been interacting with you online quite a bit. You are, one of the more prolific posters on Nuggets Twitter. I see you in you don't just, produce your own, tweets and threads and sharing your own ideas there. But I love how often you're commenting on other accounts as well. Mm-hmm. It's very I'm pretty much the same way, and I love how many questions you're always asking. And we got into a couple of different back and forths this week because of
we've had a lot of those, haven't we?
Because of this team's performance. Yeah, so I am excited to dig into that stuff. Before we do, a couple quick programming notes. Our next show isn't going to be until after Denver's next 5-game homestand. They're currently on a road trip right now. One on the road trip so far. Then they've got a couple of back and forth things going on. And then they close out March with kind of a homestand that closes out March, get a little break, and then they have a couple more home games, including the last game against the Timberwolves. So we will be back with you all after that. If you are new here, and even if you're not, please do us a favor and hit the like button. And if you are new here, definitely hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out with the algorithm as we try to grow the channel. Sports Shorts.
Hello.
I have to ask, how did you become a Denver Nuggets fan? And what is it that inspired you to, join the Nuggets Twitter morass and then end up starting your own podcast recently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In the spirit of March, I always remember looking back to kind of my first March Madness experience, and it was that I remember really well. And it was back in 2002 when maybe it was 2003. But it was when Carmelo Anthony actually was playing with Syracuse, and I remember my dad sitting me down when I was a little kid, and he's like, "You got to watch this guy. He's absolutely unbelievable." And I remember watching him throughout that whole tournament, and obviously he dominated, and they ended up winning the championship that year. And that summer, I actually ended up moving to Colorado, and so I remember going to
timing.
School. I know, right? And I remember going to school as a kid and showing up and seeing everybody in these 15 Denver jerseys, these new sleek baby blue Nuggets jerseys, and everyone was wearing them, and I'm like,
bring back the powder blues.
First of all, we could talk about that for a while, but. So that was the moment I'm like, all right, I need to be a Nuggets fan. So I remember from that moment on, I've pretty much been a diehard fan. I grew up playing basketball my whole life. It was pretty much, I lived basketball. It's all I really cared about. And so, would watch Denver as often as I possibly could. And then, I feel like my fandom did die down a little bit after Carmelo left. I felt like that was a pretty tough moment for the franchise in general. But slowly, another number 15 reeled me back in. You can guess who that might be. And so It's funny because I was actually thinking about my like how I ended up on Nuggets Twitter, and you kind of asked me how I ended up doing that. And I don't know if you guys ever remember back in the day, and they may still have this, but Denver Stiffs used to, so they used to post about the game, and they used to have these little threads down at the bottom of their site, and you could go in and read the threads, and it was just basically comments, like live comments from the entire game. And I remember I would go and read those after every single game. And I would get so frustrated at all the comments, and I would always want to join in on the conversation.
Mm.
And I'm like, I don't want to like go and write out all this stuff during the game. But man, some of these people are so stupid. Like, what are they talking about? Like, and so I remember I would do that, and I think I did that for like a year straight. And then slowly, a buddy of mine was like, "Hey, have you heard of this website called Hoops Hype?" And it's this website where you can go and you can basically they have a tab where you can go and read uh, tweets from different players and media about the game, and they kind of compile these tweets and they put them in this organized format. And so I ended up going from the threads to this Hoops Hype website, and I would follow this religiously. And I think I did that for about a year, and I would follow Ryan Blackburn and Matt Moore and all the Nuggets Twitter folks. And eventually I caved in, and I would go into Twitter and I would comment from my own personal Twitter account. And then I think it was around 2023 when the Nuggets were really having an amazing season, and I just found myself every single game, looking up all these different stats and tracking, Jokic's impact and offensive rating and touches per game, and I would take notes in my notes. Like, it took me so long to figure out I could just go online and like talk about this stuff. It's really
Yeah.
funny, but I would have pages of notes of Nugget stats, and I would send them to my brother and my mom, and they're like, "Oh, cool! Like, awesome!
Yeah.
Like,
You're just
really
like, man,
good
I wish I could
job."
send these to someone who actually cares.
And so it's just how my brain works. I love the numbers around basketball. I love the data around basketball. I love to track it in the stories that it can tell. And so I kind of created Sport Shorts to really just share this obsessive compulsive thing that I do in my free time for fun. And it's been fun. Like, it's obviously a lot at times, and sometimes it sucks you in a lot more than you want to be sucked in. But it's just been a really fun journey to meet people in the community, to meet other Nuggets fans. And then when I moved out of Denver, that was another thing that I really loved about it. Right, you don't meet a lot of Nuggets fans, and I'm not currently in Denver now, and so it's just great to have that community. And then it just is something where I can ease this like annoying compulsive habit that I have to look up and talk about numbers every time they come into my mind. So yeah, that's kind of the long version of how I joined Nuggets Twitter.
No, you're definitely speaking my language with the the obsessive compulsive nature and how you approach these things. But yeah, totally relate to that. Just it's been so cool joining Nuggets Twitter and like finding a community of people who are also like completely like obsessed with this stuff, for
Yeah.
better or worse. But
Yeah.
uh my fiance, he appreciates it because he's like, you take that stuff to those people and then leave me alone.
Exactly. Yeah, my mom doesn't have to get texts of random stats anymore, and she definitely appreciates that.
All right, let's jump into our Denver Nuggets. So, when we last left our heroes on this show, anyway, it was after a pretty redemptive win, I would say, against the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Hmm.
Uh, they obviously had a fourth quarter. I You could call it a collapse, but I think they got outclassed in that fourth quarter on the Sunday game against OKC. And
Yeah.
then on Monday on the back to back, they led nearly wire to wire and
Hmm.
just kept chugging along, kept answering runs, figured out some things defensively. But it was really the offense that carried them through. They had a historic shooting game from every area of the floor. I think they shot 56% from three as a team in that game.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask you, though, after that second OKC game, did your opinion of this Nuggets team and their ability to seriously compete for a title change at all?
Compete for a title, maybe not as much as their ability to match up with Oklahoma City, which, again, you're going to have to beat them to have any chance to win a title, most likely anyways. And so I would say, like, yes, in terms of being more confident specifically in the OKC matchup, Denver has a lot of other problems that make me concerned about them winning a championship, especially against certain other matchups. But with this matchup in particular, I think one of the things I really liked about Denver from game 1 to game 2 is we saw them make really effective adjustments, right? Adjustments that actually worked and impacted the game. And that's one of the cool things that we get to see in those back-to-back, mini series that we get, that we're seeing more and more of in the NBA lately. And so, a few adjustments that they made, right? They were able to effectively get Jokic more touches by getting him, screening him off the ball with guards and
interior touches too.
Yeah, interior touches.
OKC was giving him whatever he wanted beyond the arc in the first game.
Exactly. He was catching at the 3-point line, and they were like, "Fine, that's like, you can't hurt us as bad from there." But he was getting tons of elbow touches in that second game off of those screens. Hartenstein was like kind of confused. He was going over on some of them. He was going under on others, and one thing that they did that was really interesting, like they were able to get away with guarding Chet with a smaller defender, especially in the second half, which
a lot of Pickett, a lot of Jamal.
Really interesting. Yeah, like big bodied guards who are quick enough to stay with Chet, but they're also strong enough to kind of keep him out of the paint, which is interesting. Like Chet cannot let that happen if they want to have a chance. And
that was a big talking point amongst OKC Thunder, fans after that game.
Yeah, I think what OKC's biggest fear is that they don't have the size to match up with Denver.
Yeah.
And Denver didn't even have Aaron Gordon, right? And so
that's correct.
And he's a huge positive in that matchup, I think, for Denver. And so obviously they made a ton of shots right in that second game, but I actually liked how they played in that first game as well. I thought they played tough. I thought they were getting the shots that they wanted to get.
I agree with that.
Jamal just didn't make a lot of shots in that first game, and then he made them in the second game, right?
Yeah.
I think Matt Moore talked about that a lot. He's like, Jamal was getting really good looks. Like he was getting where he wanted to get. And that's huge. That's huge for him in that matchup, right? If he can get his looks when Dort's on him, we haven't seen that historically with Jamal against those types of defenders. He's struggled with them like a lot. I think they probably played him a little bit differently in the playoffs than they were playing him.
Can I comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I thought really in both games against OKC, Jamal was very intentional about the way that he attacked different defenders. And Dort in particular, but I think it was also the case with Case and Wallace, and less so with Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins. But with Dort and Case and Wallace, it was, I got to screen this guy off of me and attack off a screen and use my quickness advantage, particularly against Dort. Meanwhile, if it was like Wiggins or Isaiah Joe, that's when he would go more, in isolation.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like, look, Dort's a great defender. Like I think he's probably going to make all defense, and he will have earned it. For his strengths can also be turned into his weaknesses, right? Like he's this like really strong, like stocky wing who, as good of a screen navigator as he is going to struggle to keep up with a quicker guard around screens if they're set properly, which I think we did a really good job of in both games, frankly. And Jamal just made shots in the second one.
Yeah, and he also kind of has that like countryman, like, that Canada thing where
true.
Jamal just has that weird thing with people sometimes, right?
You know
he
what,
just has
though?
like
When
really
it's Dylan
personal
Brooks, he
magic.
tries to ISO him, and I don't understand that. I'm like, you should attack him the way you attack Dort, but you don't.
Yeah.
But for some reason, he's fine. Like, it's fine with Dylan Brooks.
It's true.
It's interesting.
Like, but at the end of the day, like, yeah, they made a ton of shots in that second half, but those were like within the offense, like sets that they were running that were pretty repeatable. Like, they're not
And they
going to
didn't
hit
take that many threes in that game either. It was, I think, 32 attempts in the second game.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, they shot really well from three, but it's not like they were, it was not like an abnormal amount for them. They were getting a lot, I think, in the mid range. And that came from Jamal being able to make his shots. But I think even just the attempts were more, I think, attuned to the way that Oklahoma City was defending. And as opposed to, we were, I think, forcing a bit more at the rim in the first game. But in the second game, I felt like the things we got at the rim like went down because we were only like going after the ones that were like really open, because like Oklahoma City has great rim protection, right? Like there's no denying that. Best in the league.
Yeah. Very, very good.
So yeah, that was interesting
too. You know what's funny? I'm just thinking about this. Like, one of the things OKC struggled with was playmaking out of that trap that Denver was doing to SGA. You know who would have been pretty good in that scenario for Oklahoma City? It was Josh Giddey. Like, he would have been pretty good. Like,
and also they would have just had him on ball and like gotten SGA some easier looks coming off ball, which is a lot of what they did more last year. And I've only seen it in, spurts this year where they're trying to give like Case and Wallace some on ball reps, but he's not like the level of, for all of Josh Giddey's, flaws, he was a really great playmaker.
He was, and he played really well against Denver last year. He had a lot of just like kind of weird baskets where plays broke down, and he was making good decisions, and
good offensive rebounder too. Like,
they don't really have that guy that scares me in terms of just playmaking, secondary playmaking.
That's what really kills us, right? Like, we're gonna get to this, but I feel like we really struggle against teams that have multiple high level decision makers.
You're right. Yeah, it's a huge problem for Denver defensively.
So let me get through recapping just a couple more of these games and then getting to some questions about other teams. So immediately following that Oklahoma City game, they lost to the Wolves. Again, no AG. Russ started. The starters got smacked pretty big time in that game. The bench got even more smacked. Like, it was just, they just got routed by the Timberwolves. Once again, Jamal started to show signs of life in the second half, but it was too little too late. And MPJ once again struggled in that matchup against Jaden McDaniels. Now, after that game, they had the game against the South Bay Lakers on a Friday night where, Austin Reaves...
Hey, respect the South Bay Lakers.
I mean, I do now, right? Then, like, I have this thing where I'm like, look, if a team can't score 35 in the first quarter against Denver, I don't respect them. But I respect a lot of teams in the league these days. So, that first quarter defense is... that's really something.
There was a game they gave up 35 points in the first quarter, I think 5 games in a row in late December. Like, you're not exaggerating when you say that happens all the time.
All the time.
It's insane.
I'm literally like, I was just happy if it doesn't get to 35. Like, it could be 34 or 33 because of just what the defense has been this year. In that game, Austin Reaves, he turned into Luka, basically, and we couldn't stop him in isolation. Although I actually thought that MPJ held up better against him in that game than he did in this most recent Lakers game that we will talk to. That Christian was getting cooked. Like, he clearly needed games off and maybe needs a few more off. And the Lakers were making their threes. Our bench was looking like a bunch of NPCs out there against the South Bay Lakers. Zeke and Peyton in particular were really struggling in that game to score 3 of 10 from the field. Almost all of it was stuff at the rim. Maybe they took 2 threes between them. And then, that theme continued on in the next game against the Wizards, which was a loss, 126 to 123. So we gave up the same, actually less points to the Wizards than we did against the Oklahoma City Thunder in that win, which, the way that I worded that original question about whether, it changed how you thought the team could compete for titles, like they won that game shooting really, really well. And even though they did some different things defensively, it wasn't exactly like a dominant performance, right?
They gave up 127 in both games.
Like, that's right. That's right.
And their defensive rating was in the 120s.
128.3 both games.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the Wizards game, again, like nobody was guarding anybody in that game, and that was true really across the board. Alex Sarr went off. Jordan Poole said night on a 35-footer after Keyshawn George had tied it up, and then the Nuggets didn't score on the other end. In your opinion, where was the Wizards game lost the most? Because there were breakdowns across the board, but where would you pinpoint the Wizards loss? This second Wizards loss.
Yeah, so it was one of those games where you could feel Malone's head about to explode.
My head was about to explode.
Yeah, and like
Malone is my avatar on the court.
I'm the same way, because I have a bad night when Denver's defensive rating goes up, because I am just like so frustrated by it, because so often, Grace, it's a lack of effort. And there's been a lot of games where it really has just come down to effort, right? And so Denver starts off the game scorching hot, right? They are scoring every single time down the court. Jokic is dominating offensively, but every single time they're scoring, they are just like literally conceding buckets on the other end. So they, when you start seeing Jokic concede those easy buckets early, you start to get a little worried. You get worried because the bench is going to come in and they're going to struggle scoring, and the defense is going to continue to have a hard time getting stops. And that's exactly what happened. So you get off to this early lead, and I'm a little worried. Like, they just let the Wizards score 30 points in the first quarter, and a couple of guys are feeling pretty comfortable. Our bench guys, they come in, and this is kind of just another side note about our bench, right? They have a really hard time like infecting the game with positive energy. Their young guys don't quite understand how to like impose their will on the game. It's almost as if they have to have something bounce their way, or some positive momentum come into the game that they aren't even really creating for them to have a positive impact. And especially guys like Zeke and Peyton Watson, like those guys, their effort levels are so different just depending on the game situation.
I would say I'm going to cut a little bit of slack to Zeke in this point.
Okay.
I do think that he's always trying.
Yeah, but
the discipline isn't always there. And then with Peyton, it's like the effort and the discipline.
And maybe that's a better way to put it. Maybe it's not effort, but it's like mental focus.
Yeah, focus. Yeah.
Right.
I would agree with that.
It's like Peyton Watson, the second he was focused in that game, even last night, the second he kind of got locked in and engaged in that back and forth with Luka, he was kind of dominating for a short stretch. And it didn't really matter, but it was good to see him kind of get into that. You love when he's got that positive energy. And anyways, so that game was lost simply because they were conceding buckets. They did not impose their will onto the game, and then the bench failed to do the same as they came into the game. They didn't build the lead. The lead dwindled. Jokic, I know he hates when that happens. You can see it on his face when he comes back into the game. He's like, "We're only up 6. We were up 14. Like, this is kind of annoying. Like, I just scored 20 points for you guys in the first quarter." So like, it's just annoying. That loss was annoying more than anything else. There's not a lot of big takeaways. It was the quintessential March basketball game. You got to just take it and move on. But it's a big one for seeding implications.
Yeah.
Right?
Every game counts, right?
Yeah.
Especially when things are this close. Like I said, one game is separating the 2 through 5 seed as we, speak right now. And that's the case as the Nuggets have lost to the Wizards twice and the Bulls this year. Giving them a little bit more slack for the Blazers loss in December because the Blazers just turned out to they were like about to go on a run and we didn't know it. Although the effort level from our team side, like fully in their control in that game, and it was not.
They have really one of the better records against above 500 teams in the league this year. I don't
below
know
500 teams.
Below 500. What did I say? I don't know.
You said above.
Below 500. So yeah, give them some credit. Every team loses those games.
Yeah, they definitely do. I think they have the second best record against those teams in the Western Conference after OKC. So, we're at least for the most part taking care of business. It would have been nice to have closer to like the, last year where we just weren't losing those games. But
it's also been the second best road team.
Yeah.
As well, which is
which we're going to talk about in our last segment. In my opinion, I completely agree with you. This game was March basketball. And for me, that game came down to the end of the third quarter. So the starters had finally sort of picked it up. They had gotten some stops. They had built up a lead. Then, Jamal and like Christian sat. And then some of the bench guys came in. And once again, those stagger minutes with Jokic haven't been as good this year. And that's been a consistent theme throughout most of the season, with the exception of, that long win streak that they were on at the, end of January through February, right?
Yep.
The guys are younger. They are less disciplined defensively on a consistent basis, even though you'd think like, well, if Zeke and Peyton are playing even more like now than before, those are good defenders, but a lot of it is breakdowns, right? And then with Peyton in particular, I think this was true for Zeke earlier in the year, but he's gotten better at it. Just being in the right spots on the floor offensively ends up not being a thing that they can do on a consistent basis. And that just ends up mucking things up in those minutes. And then it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, I get it. It's March. Like the starters, like they're going to do what they do. And then they did lock in for like a stretch, and it's against the Wizards. Like that should have been enough.
They were up 8 with.
They were up 10 at one point, like 11, I think.
4 minutes to go.
Yeah.
They were up 1.
And it was down to, exactly, I think it was tied
crazy
by the time the fourth quarter started. It was really, really tough. So I wanted to ask you about this. Like, were you more encouraged that the bench was able to find utility against OKC, or discouraged that they were such negatives against the South Bay Lakers and the Washington Wizards in those two games? Or is all of this just March basketball?
And maybe even throw in that Golden State game for the bench.
Yeah.
Kind of having good minutes too, right? Like those were two games where you're like, whoa, this is they might have found their bench lineup for the playoffs. Like there were a couple times where I said during those games, like, is this it? Like, is this the lineup? And then
it's easy to look good when they haven't scouted for you.
I know it's so easy to, but like, I think Nuggets fans have been searching for that playoff lineup all season long. And I think there's still some uncertainty there in game. What are we at? 70, right?
So
it on that, not encouraged. Still
on that note, though,
there's so much inconsistency.
Yes, agreed. And I agree with you that they've been trying to find, that lineup all year. In the title year, we didn't see Aaron Gordon at center at all in the regular season. And a lot of people don't remember this. But in that 2023 playoffs, in that round 1 against the Timberwolves, DJ was the backup center in the first game. He played first half minutes when Jokic came out of the game. And I don't think it was really until like game 2 that they were playing AG at center minutes. And that first game, right, like that ended up being a blowout, like expanded rotation.
Yeah, that was about to say
more at the end. But I'm talking about first half minutes. Like that's what they were going with. I'm not saying that's what they're going to go with this year, but I don't think they knew.
No.
Right? Like, I don't think they knew. Malone probably suspected that that's what they would go to once they tightened up the rotation even more as that series and as, successive playoff rounds went on. but they didn't have any data to go off of from the regular season saying that this was going to be a success.
It's just this ongoing uncertainty, and you try and plug and play different players with different combinations of starters, and it's like maybe AG and MPJ are the stagger guys because they looked so good against Golden State, and then they looked so bad against LA, and MPJ couldn't dribble with pressure, and Aaron Gordon was trying to make Jokic passes, and he's not Jokic, so like that's kind of hard.
It's tough with the way that LA was playing them too. When things are more open, I mean, even against Golden State, like AG was turning the ball over nonstop.
Oh yeah, I think he had seven. I think he had 7 turnovers.
He did have 7, yeah.
But it's so frustrating because you're like, should it be Westbrook with those guys? Because sometimes he's awesome, and then sometimes he completely tanks, a 5-minute stretch of the game, and it's like, okay, that's not going to work. And then Pickett, it's like, are we really gonna say like Jalen Pickett is the guy we should throw in there, or are we really saying Zeke Naji is gonna be the difference for this bench lineup in the playoffs? Like, yeah, they've had good moments, but like that's not realistic, right? It's just not realistic, and so who I still have no idea. I still have no idea what that bench lineup is gonna look like. Who Malone is gonna end up going with. Could he pivot back to Strother if he gets healthy?
I mean, honestly, the way the past week we have in one of my group chats, we have this kind of ongoing joke about how whichever guy is out looks the best when they're not playing.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Yeah, Julian Strother's stock
is way up right
way
now.
Up.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's talk a little bit more about the Golden State game without Jokic and Jamal. And AG put on his superhero cape, and Russ was there. He's like, I'm going to be the table setter for this team. Yep. And they went in there and they smacked the Warriors. They led wire to wire in that game, and Golden State was clearly not ready for them. But I had some more positive takeaways from that game than I would have expected to, given, the personnel that was available and how it is weird. It is still March basketball.
Spencer Jones, playoff guy. Is that your big takeaway?
Well, I might have to say some things about my fellow Stanford alum, but we can get to him. But I want to ask you, did you think that the Warriors game was more about Denver playing well or the Warriors playing poorly?
That's a funny question. It makes me think of the Russ meme, the one where he's like, "What?
The one he's
what
like,
are you talking about?" Yeah. That one. That's the reporter asked him, like, "Did you guys win this one, or did
they lose? Yeah,
did you lose this one?" He goes, "What? What are you talking about, man?" It's funny.
What, bro? What are you talking about, man?
I love that meme.
It's kind of an existential question. It's like, well, I don't know, but I mean, if
basketball is an existential game.
Yeah, it is. It's true. It's but like in that game, like Denver imposed their will from the tip. Like they were the aggressors both offensively and defensively, and Golden State never felt in control of that game at any point in time. For that reason, I'm going to say, like, I think Denver really won that game. Obviously Golden State like started off lackadaisical, and you could kind of see that, but they locked in the second quarter. Like they were really locked in trying to win that game from the second quarter on. Like they were playing with a lot of intensity. Gary Payton was like going crazy. He made Jalen Pickett look like a G League player in that game, which was a bummer. But he
made Russ look like prime Kyrie though. I mean, don't look at the shooting splits, but there was that one ISO pull-up 3 that Russ had in the clutch with GP2 on him. I was like, what are you? That was like one of those like no yes shots from Russ.
Russ has a lot of those, doesn't he?
He sure does. Yeah.
But no, I was just like proud of the team. I was proud that they were resilient enough to like go in there and give that effort and sustain it through 48 minutes.
Yeah,
I think it
even with shorthanded, right? Like, because you're missing from your guys who've been playing all year. You're missing Jokic, Jamal, and Julian. So those are also minutes that had to be filled by guys, right? We saw Hunter Tyson had his first career start, which I didn't even talk about in that game. I think he made a couple shots awesome. There too.
He had a nice game. Here's how I feel about it. In basketball and in life, you have to have little like nuggets and moments of success that you can go back to, and when like confidence is low or when you're struggling. And I think that's a moment in time where like Aaron Gordon, Russell Westbrook, Michael Porter, they can go back and like go to that moment and say, hey, we're capable of doing this without Jokic. Like we can lead a bench unit in the playoffs without Jokic and Jamal. Like we can do this. We proved it to ourselves. Like you need those moments to build off of and to build your confidence. And so for that reason, I do think it's important. Like not all games are going to go like that. And a lot of times it's going to be worse than, than what it looked like that night. But it's one of those moments. It's one of those moments you can go back to and
I will give a shout out to Spencer Jones because he did do his job in that game. Played really good defense, which I was aware of from some of his G League stuff. He's a pretty good defender, pretty good rebounder. It's the offense that I'm worried about. He's known as a shooter. He's like our all-time leader in three-pointers made, and I'm just like, guys, we need to recruit some. We need to recruit some real shooters if this is what's gonna be what here.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
But no, I'm talking about Stanford.
Oh, Stanford. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like, and he's a smart player. Generally, like, knew where to be on offense, and I think had a good chemistry with going on with Russ. And I think Russ was just like some of the shots aside, he didn't shoot actually that much in that game, and he really played within himself. So I really applaud him for doing that in a game where our two other highest usage players were out, and you could have easily seen a game where it went the complete opposite direction. So I actually think that Russ has been on a pretty good stretch. Like he started off the post All-Star pretty rough, like coming back from the hamstring and all that. And we were just like, oh my gosh, can we get like early season Russ back? And he just stopped doing some of the bad things.
Game,
but
that was one of the first. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
To interrupt, but that Warriors game was one of the first times all season where I'm like, please get Russ back in the game. Like I was like, get him back in the game right now. And I think that's the first time I felt like that all season. Not that he's been bad. It's just not something I'm like, usually
this game needs him right now. Yeah.
It's like, but they needed him in that game. And I mean, his passing was unbelievable in that game. Just unbelievable.
All right, so let's talk about the final game here in this last stretch. They played the Lakers again. No Jokic and Jamal, so that is 2 games in a row where these guys miss. And we got some word that it's Jamal's ankle for the most part. He had been on the injury report for both the ankle and the knee, and then Jokic's elbow and his shoulder apparently.
Yeah, shoulder popped up last night. I hadn't seen that.
So I have a theory about that, and I guess we'll find out when it comes to whether or not he plays the Blazers game. So there was all this talk after they missed the Warriors game about the player participation policy and Jokic like missing games for rest. Are these real injuries? Blah, blah, blah. One of the things that can override the automatic league investigation if a star misses a national TV game is if they miss the game immediately before or immediately after that, to indicate that it wasn't just like a 1-game rest.
Is that real? Is that real?
Yeah, that's in the language of the player participation policy. Now, Malone did say, I think it was post-game, maybe it was pre-game, that Jamal was closer to coming back than Jokic is because of this shoulder.
I don't buy that.
I think some people are maybe encouraged that like maybe the shoulder is the reason that Jokic's 3-point shot has been looking so off for the last few weeks. Like he's been shooting, I think, sub 33% on that for really like since the All-Star break. Yeah. And it was declining a bit before that, but it was like from he was shooting like 50 and it was like 40%, and then like at post All-Star it was just like gone, right?
And that's not including that game that he made like 6 threes against Charlotte. Like it's been, if you take that game away, it's been really bad.
Yeah, right. Get back to this Lakers game. It's another ESPN game with Legler on the call. He's just been feels
ticked.
like traveling with the team. I don't think Legler was ticked, was he?
Well, he did say he was talking about it on All NBA Pod the day before, and he's like, Adam's like, well, they might not play against the Lakers either, and Tim's like, they better play. Like, I'm calling that game. I want him to play.
Yeah. Well, he wants to see him play.
Yeah.
This was a bad one for sure. The Lakers led, I think, from tip. I don't think the Nuggets even got the first bucket.
No.
Given that
9-0 in 60 seconds.
Right. Yeah. I remember it was just threes. Gave up 46 points in the first quarter. I remember my first thought about this game was like, look, I have very low expectations for this game offensively, especially because the Lakers had been so good defensively lately, and especially when it comes to their rim protection, which is like the only shot that the guys on this team can make sometimes. So I was like, let's just see what they can do defensively and kind of evaluate from there. That was not at all how the game went. So given that Jokic and Jamal were out, right, a lot of people were thinking, like, especially after that Warriors game, like, Jokic has needed some rest because he's been particularly bad defensively of late. And Jamal has really been struggling on that end all season. But were you surprised that even with those guys out, what the texture of this game looked like in terms of that balance between offensive and defensive, struggles?
Yeah, it's so weird because, they looked so well playing that switch defense against Golden State, right? That all switch defense, and it fell apart from the tip. Rotations were slow. The guys were just Luka was getting into the lane like with ease just to start the game. I mean, and they also they also kind of did catch fire. Like some of them were due to bad rotations and some of them were tough shots. But yeah, I was a little surprised with just how poor their defense still looked with their best defensive unit arguably on the floor. Not very encouraging, I would say, at least that first quarter. I think they did a decent job, not a good job the rest of the game. But
no, that's fair, because what did they finished with 120 and they started with 46 in the first quarter. So that's
I mean, LA had
74 through three quarters. The rest of it, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, the Lakers had 62 points with 9 minutes remaining in the second quarter.
Yeah.
So not only did they give up 46 points in that first quarter, they also started the second quarter with 4 straight fast, like live ball turnovers that led to points for LA. Yeah. And that's when the game kind of was lost, right? It went from manageable 16 to 24 really, really quick.
It's really been the weirdest thing because ever since the All-Star break, the Nuggets have been turning the ball over at an exorbitant rate. Insane rate. The 2 games where they had the least turnovers since the All-Star break were both against OKC.
Yeah.
Who are the team that forced the most turnovers in the NBA.
They had 19 turnovers combined in those 2 games against Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And they've had over 17 turnovers at least the last 3 games against Washington. They had 20 against Golden State, and somehow.
I mean, if that's not March basketball for you, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to turn the ball over with Westbrook starting at point guard and no Jokic and Jamal. But
Jokic has had the issue.
I'm fine with him turning the ball over if he's got 16 assists.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
there are some insanely bad turnovers that this team has been having. Like Vlatko has had some really bad turnovers, and Aaron Gordon has had some really bad turnovers, and it's just like, I remember my brother texted me. He's like, I'm not watching. Like, what's happening? I'm like, they are just throwing the ball to LA every time. Yeah. It wasn't even great defense. I mean, the Lakers they're in the passing lane, but
they're just like, they were just in the passing lanes. They're not like this isn't OKC that we're talking about here.
And so Luka got hot. Like that happens with superstars like that sometimes. And he injected a lot of just positive energy into that game, and he was finding shooters everywhere. and they made 9 of 16 in the first quarter. Like sometimes that happens.
Sometimes that happens, but they were all open. So
yeah,
except for like 80% of them were open. 2 of them were like, okay, Luka. But you're like, oh, I wish that guy was a little up a little higher on that screen.
Here's the question, Grace. Like, how are you going to stop them from getting open threes when they have Luka and Austin Reaves on the court at the same time?
Well, here's what I will say. One of the things that was more concerning to me as someone who doesn't like the Lakers, Luka was getting downhill a lot in that game. And that's not that's like our defense, sure. But like even in past games where Luka went off on us, that's not how he was killing us. Luka getting downhill should actually be a concern for everybody else in the Western Conference, because if he's willing and able to do that a lot more again, like the Luka of old, then there are going to be some problems, for their opponents. I honestly think that most of the time, like MPJ was definitely like getting cooked in isolation and things like that. I think Peyton started to do a better job, as you alluded to, in that second half. But I think paying specific attention to how MPJ was playing him, he was trying to force the drive and hoping that Luka would kind of like pull back and like go to that step back, because that's what he usually does. Like, I honestly think that that's what the scout was. Because that's what Luka's been doing.
He doesn't want to get to the rim.
But he was doing that and getting into the teeth of the defense a lot more in this game than I've seen from him at all recently. And that's more like an observation of Luka than like our team defensively. Now, the reason it's a problem for us defensively is like we can't guard anything. So, of course, we're not going to be able to guard him going downhill and guarding the kickouts. Plus, like you and I talked a little bit about earlier, we've got Luka and Austin Reaves, and they didn't even have LeBron in this game. But we really struggle to guard teams that have these multiple quick decision makers.
Yeah.
And that's what those 3 guys are. That's just what they are.
Austin Reaves is really good. I hate to admit it, but he's really good.
I hate it too, but it's true.
He's such a quick off the dribble. He looks so hard to guard, and he's so much better than he was even last year. He's given the Nuggets some problems, but I've never felt like, oh, this guy is absolutely
killing us.
We do not have a guy to throw at him.
Yeah.
And so
you're like, oh, we can't put Jamal on Austin Reaves. Like,
no, absolutely not. I mean, I actually
think
really
Jamal did a decent job in that last game that they played against the Lakers.
Yeah.
Like, relative to how everyone else was doing against Austin, frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, he's really tough.
I mean, he had a couple plays where, he sucked 4 guys into the lane and got the pass off for an easy, alley-oop a couple times. And like, he just gets where he wants to go on the court. It's impossible to know what his next move. He really does remind me of Jalen Brunson a lot in the way he plays. I mean, like guys like that, they're so hard to predict, and that's why they're so good at drawing fouls.
Yeah, exactly.
It's impossible to know what they're going to do next.
Players he's kind of twitchy.
Yeah, players like Jason Tatum, you kind of know what he's going to do when he drives the basket. Like it's pretty predictable. Like. He's
got a couple of moves that yeah, exactly.
Like in Paulo Banchero, like he decides what he's gonna do before he actually drives, right? It's kind of just like these guys are just freelancing,
right?
Jalen Brunson, Austin Reaves, Shea, and that's why I can't believe I have Austin Reaves in the same conversation as those. It makes me sick. It makes me
I'm sick right now listening to it.
But like he's a guy
this is called, by the way, for the audience, this is called intellectual honesty. That's what we're bringing to you here, folks.
It's very frustrating. And like he's just a guy that it seems like he's always hitting lucky shots too, which makes it even worse. Like he banks threes all the time.
And then
he hit that 3 in the third quarter that sealed the game, where hit the front rim from a logo 3 and bounced in. And anyways, I'm reliving that nightmarish game all over again. But
they're a
tough matchup for Denver. They're a tough matchup. And it's not the same Lakers team that we become used to.
So
It's at the end of the day.
that was going to be my next question. Is like, do you think that matchup is tougher now on the offensive end or on the defensive end?
I mean, the answer is both, right? Like Anthony Davis was not a positive for them defensively against the Nuggets. He just wasn't.
Because like the transition defense was just
His transition defense was so bad. It was so bad. And he, Denver scored 10 points a game off of his poor transition defense alone, it seemed. Like in the playoffs, it happened. Because he was falling down. He was, he just
complaining.
I mean, I don't want to go Matt Moore on the whole
Anthony Davis thing. Yeah.
He was not a good matchup for Jokic and for Denver. He made the Lakers play slower in almost every way. He wasn't able to muscle Jokic when he was guarding him one-on-one.
He wasn't that quick of a decision maker. Not that he was a slow one, but you see the difference now when it's like obviously like Luka instead of AD, right?
And then you get rid of D'Lo and you add Dorian Finney-Smith and you have Jordan Goodwin, who just comes out of the woodwork, and he's a good player. You're not sold on Jordan Goodwin? Yeah,
I'm absolutely not sold on Jordan Goodwin.
That's okay.
The most disappointing thing about both of the recent games against the Lakers is like, guys, we can't make Jordan Goodwin look good. Like, this is a guy that couldn't make it on the Suns roster. Like, what are we talking about?
Wild. But like Dalton Connect is a new wrinkle with that team. I think just that shooting threat, that spacing threat.
Yeah, I'm just like, guys, that's what he does. There was a play last night where AG like kind of closes out to him, but like no hand up. I'm like, what do you think this guy is gonna do when he gets the ball? Yeah. It was very like a very bad like game from a scouting perspective. Like not in terms of the I don't know what the team scouts did, but there was very bad know your personnel from our guys in particular across this whole game. It was so bad. There was this one short closeout that Christian had against Gabe Vincent. So I'm like, are you worried that Gabe Vincent is going to blow by you? Like, what is
Christian
going on right now?
Might have the worst closeouts I've ever seen, by the way.
He was drafted because he was one of the best closeout defenders in his draft class, and I think he has been generally good there, but recently it's just been,
I don't know, go look at the percentages that people shoot with Christian Braun guarding them from three. I think teams are shooting 45% with Christian Braun guarding them from three this year.
Is that a thing?
It's a real thing. I don't know how that's possible or if it's just bad luck. But him and AG particularly have had a lot of really, really bad, like short closeouts on good shooters this year. And it's
where I'm like, guys, it's like, this is what this guy does. They're not going to blow by you, especially you. Like Christian, I'm like, he's not going to blow by you. I promise.
Do you, kind of a side question, do you feel like Christian Braun has the potential to be a better defender than he's shown this year?
Absolutely, because he's shown that in prior seasons. I think that this year has been a combination of, I excoriated the decision to let KCP walk and not replace that screen navigation function in some other way with some other move. But Christian can absolutely be better than he's been, and we've seen it in some games this season. But I think it's a combination of increased starter minutes, or increased minutes as a starter. Increased to some extent offensive burden, right? He's a play finisher and he's doing it more at a higher volume than he ever has before on the offensive end.
Right.
And just like getting used to all that. He's guarding the other team's like best matchups on a more consistent basis than he was before. I think it's easier to look like a really great defender when you're not guarding like the top guys all the time. But I do think that there have been a select few, unfortunately, just a select few matchups where he has really excelled this year. But it hasn't been consistent enough to really, make an impact on that end of the floor. And that's really tough on this team because it's like, he should at least be standing out relative to everyone else. But there are so many nights where even that's not the case. But I do absolutely think he can be a better defender than he has shown himself to be.
Yeah.
Especially like to be less sort of situationally dependent.
Yeah.
Like that's what we really need out of that fifth starter spot. And I think especially like he's a really great play finisher, but that he's not really like an offensive like creator. I wouldn't say that he has an offensive burden in that sense. So he really needs to bring it more on the defensive end. I don't know that that's going to come by the time the playoffs come around.
Yeah, I don't think
but that's going to be something, a point of emphasis for sure going into next season.
Yeah, one interesting, just thought about maybe why he hasn't been as good is like his increased offensive role is obviously like that takes a lot of energy out of him to be literally like sprinting the court every single time Jokic gets a rebound. Like I'm sure there's like a fatigue factor that does play into some of his defensive struggles, but like you said, I think he's got the tools. We just need to see it a little bit more consistently from him. And I don't know. It's tough with this team when there are three other bad defenders around him all the time, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, KCP, like, it's one of the things, like, this season makes me feel even more that KCP was robbed of not making an all-defensive team last year, because he was, like, holding this thing together with duct tape and glue and somehow turning it into a top 10 defense.
Wild.
Yeah. So I just had a couple more notes on this Lakers game before we move on to the next segment.
Go ahead.
I do think in this Lakers matchup, Dorian Finney-Smith is a problem for a multitude of reasons, which is like not something I expected to say, a few months ago about Dorian Finney-Smith. But MPJ now struggles a lot in this matchup. And it's not just because of Dorian Finney-Smith, but he contributes to it. He's a bigger wing. He can be, he's rangy and like can be kind of handsy as well. And the Lakers are generally just playing more physical defense under JJ Redick. I should say that it took a few months into the season for that to manifest, right? Mm-hmm. Even before the trade. But the number of matchups where MPJ is an advantage on either end of the floor is really dwindling right now. And, despite he started the season off so well and doing a lot more, stuff off the bounce. But again, when defenses key in on him, he tends to disappear. This was the case in the Warriors game recently. In the second half of that game. I thought he got better looks actually in the second half of that game, but just like wasn't able to make shots after, scoring like 20 points in the first half. And then this Lakers game, like they were fully on him and he was just not able to like free himself and make himself useful. It's just one of those things. I recently started like kind of dabbling in watching football, but it's one of those things that I, have really keyed in on when it comes to fans complaining about their team's receivers and like, you gotta be able to get separation so we can get you the ball, man. Like that's your job. Obviously in this Lakers matchup in particular with less so with LeBron as we've seen in past years, but with Austin and Luka, now MPJ is a bigger isolation target than he is probably in most other matchups in the West. Despite the, one-on-one talent that we have in the Western Conference, I think he holds up better in those. Maybe it's just a matter of like, he needs more reps. Cause there was a time where I would have said like MPJ just gets cooked in isolation by everybody, but that's not true. Like he holds up better in certain matchups than others, particularly with guards. Cause he tends to just kind of give ground well. And then he'll come in for late contests, but the level has
been respectable this year. To be honest, I mean, his off
the one-on-one defense, the off-ball defense, yeah, I agree.
His one-on-one defense,
yeah. But this is a particularly tough one because of how crafty these two guys are, and now we're talking about Austin Reaves as a matchup problem.
What is this universe that we live in?
Yeah,
this basketball universe. This feels like this feels like one of the bad multiverses of basketball right now. With
this is the darkest timeline. Thank you, Nico Harrison, for setting off a black hole that is about to engulf the universe.
What's the over under on how many years before we stop getting Nico Harrison hate tweets every single time Luka has a game? Is it ever going to stop?
Okay. I think it was last year.
Yeah.
The entire arena at the United Center was booing Jerry Krause with his widow up on the Jumbotron as they were doing memorial type proceedings about him. And he didn't trade, Michael, like pre-prime Michael Jordan for who's the Anthony Davis equivalent there?
That's a great callback right there.
So I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.
That is great. That's fantastic.
Oh, last note. I got a note from production here. Austin Reaves did a decent job guarding Jamal in the playoffs last year. Chasing him around.
Now we're talking about Austin Reaves' defense.
Well, hang on. I my note on this is that, and Jamal was also super hampered, but if you look back to the shooting splits in that series, Austin couldn't get anything going offensively. And I do think that the defensive burden of having to guard the other team's best perimeter player, which that is still going to be the case with this current Lakers roster construction, unless they want to go smaller, which creates other issues. Are you starting Jordan Goodwin? What are we going to talk about here?
Not sure Vanderbilt can guard Jamal. I don't think he's fast enough to guard Jamal. That might be the only other guy they would try on him, right?
With the exception of last night, Vanderbilt's lost his minutes in these games, by the way, including the one where they blew them out with Jokic.
What was he a minus last night?
He was in I think he won his minutes last night, but barely.
Okay.
But in the other games with Jokic, he was a pretty big minus. He was a minus 13 in that game where they blew him out. So
I'd like Vanderbilt if they don't want to play him. I'd like to have him come to Denver. I love Vanderbilt.
I think he's peak, honestly. Where it's he could have his good stretches and give you some energy, but there are some serious problems there. So that's the other thing with the Lakers is that I do think at their top end, they can create some real issues, but there are still lots of guys on this team that are are you really trusting this guy as your fifth or sixth man to be a high-level contributor in a playoff setting against Nuggets, against any other, high-level Western Conference teams? I don't know. And any team worth their salt should be able to play these guys off the floor. But eventually you get to a point where it's these guys are all we have, so they're going to be on the floor.
Yeah. Look, Luka's he doesn't probably get enough credit for making the players around him better.
He makes their job a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think he's the only one that's
Jackson Hayes looks good now.
Yeah, Jackson Hayes has not been a playable NBA player his entire career. And he's catching lobs from Luka with ease, no one within 4 feet of him.
And now he's playing defense.
Luka's legitimately the second best player in the league. To me he's pretty clearly number 2, and then you can argue with whoever, maybe Giannis or SGA after that. But this guy's, he's unbelievable. He's really, really, really good.
But
still,
you can't pay him a supermax because sometimes he drinks beer.
Sometimes he drinks beer and smokes cigars and he gets injured once in a while.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next segment here.
Okay.
You and I had a little bit of a back and forth that was inspired by a pretty epic rant by Tim Legler on that same episode of the All NBA podcast where you talked about he wanted Jokic to play in that next game. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
About, what happens when a team is trying to basically intentionally try to get certain matchups in the playoffs. And I should specify that potentially losing games on purpose to do so. So our debate here is a more specific question, but we can open it up more broadly. But should the Nuggets intentionally, if they're in the position to, throw games at the end of the season to try to avoid the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Well,
now,
when you put it like that, yes.
Well, hang on. I want to lay out a couple of specifics, and then I'll let you make your case. So
wax poetic. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So Adam Mares threw that idea out there before Legler went on his epic rant, and I just have a couple of quotes from Legler here. He said, quote, "If you're a 2 or a 3, he's referring to seeding here, worried about a 6, 7, or 8, you are already psychologically screwed." Then he went on to say, if he was a head coach, he encountered one of his assistant coaches muttering about matchups, then he would fire them. And that went on for like 3 minutes, right?
Hilarious.
I did not expect that to get as much traction as it did. I got some ESPN writers liking it and things like that too. So that was fun.
You're like pumping up their guy. You were.
Yeah, it's true.
You were in favor of it. You liked it, right?
I did, and we'll talk about it. But let me preface this by saying first, this may not even be an option when it comes to the end of the season. There is currently 1 game separating the 2, 3, and 4 seed, and then the Grizz are only 1 game behind them at 5 right now. There's 1 game separating the 6, 7, and 8 seeds, and I believe the Timberwolves are the ones that currently sit in the 8 seed right now. Before you wax poetic, trying to manipulate standings at this point in the season, where there's still 10 games left, we have no idea what it's gonna look like with 3, 4, 5 games left in the season. It's a bit of a dangerous game, right?
It is. Yep, I agree.
So my first question to you, and you can go on from here. You've said that it is, quote, important to have a preferred matchup. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that, and then how you feel about this topic more broadly?
Part of this is like just this, psychological preference. And I think one thing that bothers me about sports fans is this concept of like eternal optimism and like false positivity, right? And it goes back to this sports culture of like, yes, we can, like, believe in yourselves, like, we can do it, like, don't be scared of anything, don't be scared of any moment. Like, if you are mentally strong enough, like, that's all that matters. And like, good for you if you like have a strong mentality and you're impossible to break and like you're morally superior because you are able to be positive. Like, thumbs up. Like, let me just give you a quick scenario, okay? When I say it's important to have a preferred matchup, so they play Memphis and Houston to close the season. Denver does, right? If they are the 2 seed going into these games, and Minnesota is clearly locked into that 7 seed. So just this particular scenario.
And remember, the play-in still happens, so they might not.
Okay, but
there's like a 50% chance that
there's a good chance you're going to play Minnesota. I mean, and then let's say Golden State is the 6th seed. Can we sit here and have an honest conversation and say Denver would not prefer to play Golden State over Minnesota? I don't know. Like if we asked any Nuggets fan, do you think out of 10, how many would say I would rather play Minnesota than Golden State? Because we've lost to Minnesota 3 times.
Well, except
2 of them
RX Smart, who says that the Timberwolves are his preferred match.
Shout out to RX Smart and his positivity. He's one of the positive guys. Again, good for you. Thumbs up. I like to deal with the facts, and the facts tell us Minnesota has owned Denver. They knocked you out of the playoffs last year. And if you are too prideful to admit that that's a bad matchup, and you're going to go into those games and be like, we want it. We want the smoke. Like, I don't think that's the smart decision. Now, we can debate on how you want to manipulate the standings, because it's probably a bad look going into those last 2 games and just sitting your guys saying, we're we're not even going to try to win these games, and like you're going to obviously fall to the 3 seed. So you can debate on how you want to go about that. They might be thinking ahead of that right now. They might be trying to get out of that 2-3 seed right now because they don't like that matchup with Minnesota. Like I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
I mean, Minnesota could end up in 6 is the other thing. So you don't want to lock yourself into.
So you're right. And like, I don't even think they'll have the luxury to be able to manipulate their seedings at the end of the day, because I don't think they're playing good enough basketball. I think if they're lucky, they end up in the 3 seed at the end of the season, because they still have a lot of tough games on the schedule. But like, my point is, like, there are pretty inarguable facts that tell you, like, Golden State is a better matchup. Like, we would prefer to play Golden State in a playoff series. We would not prefer to play Minnesota. And so in the NBA, like, it is a chess match, right? You want to try and take advantage of every possible thing that you can on your way to winning a championship. And so if that means losing a game and falling to the 3 seed to get a better matchup in the first round, like, I think that's the smart move personally. So like, I can see the other side, but I stand pretty firmly on the fact that, like, you want to find the best matchup that you can.
If they do intentionally tank to get a preferred matchup in round 1, what is the ultimate goal of that season? Is it still a title? Is it just to make the second round? Do you consider things like, well, who would our round 2 opponent be?
I think so.
Like, yeah, let's say it's, you know, I don't know who's the second seed in this scenario where Denver falls to 3. Is it the Lakers?
It might be.
And then you end up probably in a series with them where they have home court advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, that's important probably to consider as well. But like, again, you're dealing with the facts presented in front of you. You're not just saying.
No, sure. That's why I'm asking. Then it's like, so we're talking. Yeah. There's a lot of emphasis on that first round when. Yeah. Let's say that you don't have the opportunity to, because of the way that the tiebreakers are working out, losing those like last 2 games or even one of them at the end of the season might not drop you to second. It might, or third. It might drop you to 4th or even 5th.
It might drop you to 5th. Yeah.
Which would mean that even you might get a favorable matchup in the first round, but then in the second round, you're facing OKC, the best team in the conference, right then and there.
Yeah, but like, do we prefer LA over Oklahoma City at this point?
I don't know. Do we?
I think there's an argument there. I don't know if the answer is yes, but I think there's an argument.
Now, generally speaking, though, would you entertain an argument that the best path to a title generally involves putting off facing the best team in the conference for as long as possible? That's usually the point of trying to get as high a seed as possible.
Yes. Yeah, okay. I think so. But I also think that best team depends on your matchups, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think Denver had really, really good playoff matchups in 2023. They were facing the Minnesota.
I don't think there were bad ones in 2023, to be completely honest.
Yeah, they were. You're right. I think they probably win that no matter who they play. But you know, they were facing a young Minnesota team. They were facing a Phoenix
injured too, right? And Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels made a big impact in the series the very next year.
Naz Reid was out that series, wasn't he? So then you play the Lakers, who had half a season together and still had, you know, they didn't have a lot of reps together. Like, those were good. Those were good matches. Yeah.
As we saw the following year.
They weren't actually.
They were a play-in team again.
So, you know, last year, if you avoid Minnesota in that second round, who's to tell what happens with Denver in the playoffs? I don't think you knew going in that was a terrible matchup, and you know, it might bite you in the butt. You might think Houston's a good matchup come playoff time, and they kick our butts. Like, that's wholly. I mean,
the Lakers almost looked like a bad matchup for us in that first round just because of how poorly we were playing, right?
Yeah, I think for sure.
It was just like we overwhelmed them talent-wise. Like, we were just the better team. But it's not like most of the time our best players were not like shining in that series because of how banged up and worn down everybody was.
Yeah. But I think playing Memphis, if you get Memphis in the second round, like, and you can find a way to get Golden State and then Memphis, like, you're gonna want to try and get that if you can, if you have any control over it. I just think there are certain teams that Denver feels more confident playing against, and this isn't even for Denver. I think this goes for every team. I think it goes for LA may just feel like they're better than everyone else, and they would be great if Denver felt like that. Can they say that they are? And maybe that's what Tim is talking about. Like, maybe they have already lost because they know that they have mismatches that they don't want to play in the first round. That might be true, So, but at this point, with this team being realistic, there are certain matchups they want to avoid, for sure. As long as
when talking about that, like the knowledge of it, you did say online, you made it clear that, quote, it's not something you speak about out loud, but it's something that should be understood. And I want to know who you meant would have that understanding.
I don't think players would dare say it out loud. I don't think they would dare say it. But I do think coaches could probably talk about it behind the scenes in a strategic meeting together, saying, hey, this is probably the best case for us going forward. If that means you've already lost, I mean, Tim Legler's been in the NBA locker room for, he was there for over a decade, and he understands how the dynamics work. Maybe. But if I'm a coach, I'm talking about matchups. That's not a conversation I'm just not going to have, right? So,
well, yeah, you're going to talk about matchups because you're going to be game planning for everybody, and you're going to be talking about, like, man, like, this SOB just gives us problems all the time for 100%. This or that reason. So they're going to be, discussing the intricacies of those things for sure. I guess my response to that about the, players wouldn't dare say it out loud. But if you're talking about
I'm not saying they players, shouldn't, but they won't.
No. But right, they won't, and I don't think they should either. But what I'm saying is, I think you kind of already said it, but they already know if we're talking about whether players are going to be playing or sitting for certain games at the end of the season. One of the examples here, because I had a lot of people kind of quote tweeting it with their past experiences with such things with their teams, right? And one of the examples that always like really stands out to me, it was just last year where the Cleveland Cavaliers, they were in a position in game 82 to secure the second seed, which meant they don't see the Celtics potentially until the Eastern Conference Finals, right? And in the fourth quarter of that game, they're leading against the Hornets, and then JB Bickerstaff sits all the starters with them up, and then the Hornets end up taking it at the end, and they like tank away like a double-digit lead. And it was to try to get a preferred matchup in that first round against the Orlando Magic in particular. So they dropped down to the 4 seed. They won that series against the Magic, but it took 7 games. And Jarrett Allen got injured over the course of that series. I think he got injured late in game 5. It was either game 5 or 6 of that series. And by doing so, they intentionally end up putting themselves in Boston's bracket, play them in round 2, and they got they got gentlemen swept, they got shellacked, wiped the floor with them. Boston was very comfortable in that series, right? But Cleveland could have theoretically put themselves in a position to, potentially make the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since LeBron got there. And actually that series win since LeBron left, I should say, that series win against Orlando was the first series win that they'd had since LeBron left. So maybe that was more, important to them. Yeah. But that was the other thing is like let's see the Orlando Magic this year. Like they struggled to score. That was a really ugly series from both teams. But I do think that the Orlando Magic ended up having a bigger chip on their shoulder playing in that series. Sure. And they're this like young athletic team that's like, what? Like, why are they trying to play us? On like they're dropping from like giving up the second seed on purpose to try and play us. Like I think that they did, take that personally, and I do think that it drove part of that why that series went so long. And so I do think it's really bad bulletin board material for your first round opponent. And we've seen Denver struggle with these young athletic teams, and you don't want to, if your goal is at least to make it past the first round, like you still don't want to have an extended series. Right. Yeah. And it's like bad karma. But the other thing
it upsets the basketball gods. Like I can see that perspective for sure. Yeah.
So the other sort of caveat here is like, God forbid the plan falls through. Like, let's say you sit guys the last 2 games and then the bench ekes it out anyway, because like Houston and Memphis, just maybe they're gassed and they're sitting their guys too. They're like happy with where they are in the standings, let's say. Maybe they want Golden State too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
And then you end up not being able to get your preferred matchup. In fact, you get the worst matchup imaginable. And then everybody has kind of known, whether out loud or subconsciously, about this plan this whole time, and you get the team you're trying to avoid. Doesn't that mean that like the psychological edge that team has over you is even bigger? And maybe a series that could have gone 6 or even 7 is now 4 or 5.
So, and I think that's why it's important. Like you can debate on how you want to do it. Like I think the way JB Bickerstaff did it so transparently, like obviously we're tanking to play you guys. Like that's probably not a very smart approach, right?
It probably didn't give his incredibly young team a ton of confidence either.
I know, right? And so maybe you have to figure that out, in advance. And it's impossible to actually control at the end of the day. Like you're not really able to pick your matchups unless you transparently tank the last game of the season. And I disagree with that approach. I think you're showing your cards way too much. You got to keep them close to you. But what I'm saying is these conversations are absolutely happening in every single locker room. Hey, do we like this matchup? Like, what do we think about this matchup? And like, I think the way you actually go about trying to manipulate the matchups is tricky. Like, and I think there's different ways you can do it. You can sit guys now. You can drop to 4 or 5, and it's going to be harder to get that 2 seed, but you're more comfortable in that 4 or 5 seed anyways, and you're okay if you stay there. Like that could, who knows? Maybe that's what Denver's doing right now. It's not super transparent though. It's not like Minnesota's like, oh, they're doing this not to play us, Whereas if you tank it, I don't think
Minnesota's thinking about Denver right now. They're just trying to get out of the play.
What in the world? Yeah, we could talk about them for a little bit.
That Pelicans loss for sure.
Unbelievably bad loss. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's kind of my stance on it. Like this conversation's happening. Like stop with this like old school mentality, like that you have to be mentally tough and never give an inch to your opponent. Like strategy is important in the game of basketball, and you have to think about that. And I just think this is just one of the strategies that you have to consider when going into the playoffs. And it goes for every round. Like Denver's goal isn't to win the first round. So if they play Minnesota, they'll be ready to play Minnesota, but it's not their preference. It's not their preference at the end of the day.
So let's talk about a couple of other, sort of miscellaneous aspects of this. Now, generally speaking, the reason that you want to get a high seed is, well, to avoid the better teams, but also to try to get home court advantage. And I do think that that's important. And a lot of people focus up on the, like, well, if you end up having to play a game 7, you want to be able to play it at home. Denver does not have a great history with home game 7s.
Terrible history. Yeah.
But I do think that an underrated aspect or an under-discussed aspect of home court advantage is getting to play the first 2 games of the series at home. Now, the Nuggets have not been as good at home this year as they have been in years prior, and they're not as good at home as most of the other, playoff teams in the conference. They have the 6th best home record in the conference.
That is crazy.
I know. Will and I had a whole segment at the beginning of the year about the schedule that's like, is altitude actually an underrated advantage? Have we swung? Has the pendulum swung back around? Turns out Matt Moore was right. He's like, nope, it actually gets overrated. And we saw that this year. Like, they have not, enjoyed the benefits of the 5280. I'm going to blame the jerseys, personally. But how...
jerseys, man. Yeah.
So on top of that, though, Denver has the second best road record in the conference. They're actually on pace to have a slightly better road record this year than last year. So that's how they've kind of been able to...
Road record last year, right?
Say that again? Yeah, it was a franchise record, road record, and they're probably going to break it again or at least match it this year. How confident are you in Denver's ability to go on the road for multiple series? Because they, whether they want to or not, could end up in the 5th seed just because of tiebreaker scenarios right now. We're not really in a great place with anybody but Memphis. Like, the Lakers now own the tiebreaker over us because they're going to win their division. And the Rockets are currently up on us. We're going to see how, those other games go this season. And Memphis, we're currently tied with, I think, 1 game left at the end of the season. So
we haven't seen Denver not have home court advantage in a playoff series since Phoenix 2022, I believe. So that was the last time Denver did not have home court advantage, and they
that was 21. In 22, sorry. That was the
Golden State.
The Golden State.
Yeah. You're right. And obviously they did not fare well in that series. Golden State was a much better team than them, like, clearly. Here's the thing about the team this year, though. This team is so weird and unpredictable, and they're such a resilient team. I would not be surprised to see them fare really well in a series that starts on the road, because it's finally like that they don't have this pressure like they would have. And I think they felt it last year against Minnesota. They played so much tighter at home than they did on the road in all 3 of the 3 out of the 4 home games that they played in that series. They lost 3 home games that series, which is
a weird series.
What a weird thing. And
even in that game 5, everybody but Jokic was really tight. Like, he put the team on his back in that game 5. It was one of his best games ever, probably his best playoff game ever.
And, like, think about the home games they've played on national TV this year. Like, they've not played well.
Don't get me started on this team's ESPN record. It's not good.
ESPN in particular.
I think they're 2-6 now on ESPN, and I think they're 2-1 on TNT though.
They like playing on TNT. It's true.
Yeah.
They really, Jokic especially loves playing on TNT. But
because he knows he'll get Shaq on the mic at the end of the game.
Right. I just think I'm totally okay with this team playing on the road, because they haven't shown that even playing at home is a huge advantage for them. And they're weird. They're a weird team. They do weird things. They do unexpected things. And like, they could totally go up 2-0 on the road and then come back tied 2-2. Like, that's just not out of the realm of.
Yeah.
And, like, they played really well in Oklahoma City, which is a really tough environment to play in. They have played well in a lot of those games. I mean, they didn't play well last night against the Lakers, who have a great home record.
I was watching that game, and I literally forgot that it was in LA until after the game. I didn't even realize it. Because, like, I don't know. I just expect the Nuggets to play like that at home.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It felt like they were playing at home. So just weird stuff all around there.
So I will say on the playing tighter or less pressure thing, it is still the case with this team that the role players, like, I don't know if you could say they play better at home. Their home record is still better than their road record. Like, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But Christian in particular shoots way better at home than on the road. He's shooting like 59% from the field and 43% from 3 at home, 34% from 3 on the road, and just 55% on the road. So he's just like he just finishes everything at the rim regardless of anything going on. But the 3-point shooting, there's a pretty big gap there. So that's definitely something to consider.
That's interesting.
The home record isn't that much better than the road record, but it is better. It's 23-11 versus 21-15 on the road.
There was a point in time where this team won. I believe it was, and I might have to fact check this, but they won when the starting five of KCP and was there. They won,
or even just the core four.
38 games in a row. 38 at home when they were healthy, when they were fully healthy. That is an insane number, and they are so not invincible at home anymore in any way. So it's just a really, really weird turnaround in development, and it's pretty concerning, I think, come playoff time, because that was a big advantage for them. Like they had that swagger and confidence, and it just doesn't feel like they have that same thing anymore, you know?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So the last question that I have on this topic is, as a Nuggets fan, how would you feel if Denver lost in round 1 in 7 games to the Memphis Grizzlies?
How would I feel?
Yeah.
I would feel like it was time to blow it up. If that happened.
That's a blow it up kind of loss for sure.
It's a blow it up loss.
I'm really curious what would have happened if Orlando hadn't blown their 20-point lead on the Cleveland Cavaliers in game 7 last year. If Franz Wagner hadn't gone, what was it, like 3 of 19 from the floor or something like that in that game. What the Cavs would have done, if anything, differently. Like, would Donovan have extended? Would they have ended up trading Darius? Would they have traded one of the bigs, probably Jared Allen, or just not extended him? I think that is one of the more, like, that example, as I was kind of going through these, like, well, that ended up being, you know, some bad karma for that year, but obviously the Cavs have bounced back in a huge way this year with their new coach.
Yeah.
That example rings a little too close to home for, just based on the way the season has gone with all the injuries. Everything's stilted. They're not quite as good when everybody is healthy.
That's not out of the realm of possibility. It's not.
Things are not quite fitting.
If you told me that happened, I don't think I could honestly say I would be like totally shocked. Like a first round exit is not out of the realm of possibility for this team, even with Jokic. I mean, I know it's crazy to say that, but they've shown they are what they are this year, and what they are is a really hard team to understand. And sometimes they look really, really good, and sometimes they look abysmal. Yeah, like, just to put it lightly. Like, so it's you know, my expectations are very tempered going into this playoffs this year. I think last year was so hard because expectations were sky high. They had their, you know, I was really confident that they could get back to the finals last year. This year, I'm back to like, hey, if they get to the Western Conference Finals, that's kind of a win, you know, for this team, which is a bummer. It's definitely a bummer.
Yeah. It's different after they win a title, right?
Yeah, it is different. I mean, that was a great moment, and it's something you can, again, like those small moments that you can remember and lean back on, right? That's why there's that still that small bit of confidence that they maybe can get it done, because they've done it before. But
if only they could play defense. All right. Well, now that we're on it, then let's imagine a mystical universe here. So I will let you go first. You can just lay out your 4 series, and you can give your reasons why, and then I'll lay out mine, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think well, now that you mentioned them losing to the Grizzlies in 7, now I'm like kind of scared, but listen, okay, so I think you're right. Historically, you want to put off the best team as long as you can. And so that would likely, I mean, obviously there's a lot that can change, but likely that sets you up with a first round playoff series versus Memphis. I like that matchup for Denver. I think they probably have some issues with Ja at times, but I think offensively they can do enough to win that series in 5 or 6 games. That sets you up with a second round series with Oklahoma City going on the road, right? And I think which is crazy. I think I'm a little bit more confident. Also, I just think it would be way more fun to play Oklahoma City in a playoff series instead of LA. I am so sick of playing the Lakers in the
Oh
playoffs.
my gosh,
I
same.
never want to
That's
see them
literally one of
again,
my
ever.
bullet points is I just want new teams.
I do not want to play the Lakers again. It doesn't even have to do with them being amazing, which they're a lot better, but I just don't want to ever play them in the playoffs ever again. It's too much stress. It's too much hate. My mind, I shouldn't have that much hate in my soul. So hopefully they can avoid the Lakers again. So Thunder second round, they could beat the Thunder. I'd love to see the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. I know that's probably not the most realistic result there. It would be between.
I think the Warriors have a
Lakers.
lot of matchup issues in the West right now. I don't know that they make it to round 2.
Yeah,
regardless.
I don't think the Warriors are that good. But it would be crazy if they could go into the second round and beat LA somehow. I don't see that happening. So like that leaves LA or Houston, right? That you would get to play in the Western Conference Finals. So if we're doing likely, it's probably going to be LA.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, preferred it would be Houston or Golden State in that Western Conference Finals. Houston or Golden State. Who's more likely between Houston or Golden State to make it to the Western Conference Finals? That doesn't seem very likely, right?
That's tough. I think
It
I
could
have
be Minnesota. It actually could be Minnesota again.
Honestly, yeah. Like if they get to avoid Oklahoma City, I think they're a bad matchup for a lot of teams. Like they're just a good playoff team. They've got a lot of resilient factors. And I think their offense is a bit more diversified now. Let's assume you get the best version of playoff Julius Randle, then I think they could make it.
I don't want to play Minnesota again either, though. I'm gonna say Houston. Let's
say Houston. Let's give them a Cinderella story. Yeah.
And then we'll go Boston in the finals. I think Denver's got a better chance to beat Boston than they do Cleveland, which is crazy to say.
No, I completely agree with that. I think Cleveland or the Knicks, because those are just really, really awful matchups for us. And Cleveland's obviously really good.
It does not make sense that the Knicks are a bad matchup for Denver.
They just play 5 out. We can't guard them. It's really just we can't guard them.
It's very frustrating.
I guess we're like, okay, OG Anunoby, are you going to score 40 every playoff game?
Yeah, seriously. So we have Grizzlies, Thunder, Houston, Boston.
They might if the Knicks made the finals, they might be like super injured by the time they get there, though.
Yeah, I'm curious how Brunson will come back from that ankle injury, because that was a bad one, a really bad ankle injury.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine though. Like he's really tough. He's really tough though.
Yeah, just the tough it out mentality, right?
Yeah, those Villanova boys. Okay, so my title path is very different than yours, actually. The way that my Western Conference has OKC in 1, I have Memphis 2, and I like that sweet spot at 3 for Denver. Then I gave Houston the 4 because I don't want LA to have
Who was your 2?
Have home court.
Memphis was your 2. Okay.
Yeah. This is preference, right?
Okay.
So then I have the Warriors in 6 and the Clippers in 7, and I had the Kings knocking the Wolves out of the playoffs.
I love it.
The play-in.
I love it.
So OKC gets to play. You can't be losing to the Pelicans right now, guys. Like
Pelicans, and then
that's coming from a Nuggets fan that just lost to the Wizards, but leave me alone.
The Pacers loss was almost worse than the Wizards loss, though.
It was more understandable though, because like it was just like what we did to the Warriors. Like they had no idea who was playing or how they'd play, and I think the Pacers always give the Pacers always give the Wolves trouble just because of the way that they play. Like it's 5-out drive and kick, right? And they just play really fast. I have Denver obviously playing the Warriors in the first round. I think that is our best matchup in the West. We have a size advantage. I'm less worried about the rest of their team. Like Steph could always go off, especially if he's able to find openings against us. But I just think the rest of their team is not enough. And I feel confident about our ability to dominate that matchup more physically.
Yeah,
And
I hope
then
Jonathan Kuminga plays 40 minutes a night in that series because he's
I don't know
awful.
about that. He kind of kills us when we're not
No,
playing
he's
Spencer Jones. No, that's the thing. It's like
I
I know
can't. I don't
Kuminga,
like
but I
Kuminga
know
anyway.
how Kuminga looks against us.
Yeah, but he's one of those guys that premeditates his move every single time. Like he fits into that mold of player, and
Yeah, that's
I think
true.
Denver does pretty well against those guys.
That's
So
true. We do like those Tatums and not SGA.
not SGA. Kawhi's. I mean,
Kawhi's, yeah.
yeah,
We don't have another matchup against the Clippers this season, and we haven't
yeah,
really gotten to see how our current defensive core looks against Kawhi. They've had success
yeah,
against him in the past, but that's one
right.
of the reasons that I don't like the hubris of being like, yeah, Clippers, like we definitely still own that matchup. I don't know about that right now. So I'm going to go with the Warriors.
You're
The
better than me.
In round 2, I've got OKC facing the Lakers.
Oh, that would be
And
beautiful.
I think OKC handles the Lakers. I think it's a tough series because the Lakers are really physical and all of that. But OKC is like a better team by margin. And I think that should matter.
Mhm.
And I do think that one of the things that they do not struggle with is teams that have quick decision makers. That's not really like they recover so fast, like they play really hard and they're ready to like
Yeah,
bring it to you and in any given matchup. So I think that they're ready as a team to make, at least the Western Conference Finals. Then I
I
have
like
us
it.
facing Memphis in the second round. I have them beating the Clippers, but maybe we end up playing the Clippers in that scenario. And I think that at that point I'd be fine with it because I'm like, okay, we've made it through round 1. Like we've shown that we
Yep.
can like play basketball. Like let's try to do it again.
Right.
And then in round 3 in the Western Conference Finals, obviously we play OKC in that scenario. And then it's like, all right, here it is.
That's it.
Title fight, hopefully. Then for the finals, I've got us playing the Indiana Pacers.
Oh gosh.
The Pacers, they're just kind of like that pain in the ass of the Eastern Conference right now. They're not
I
like
love
a
it.
great team, but they're not really like a bad, like they don't have a bad matchup. Like there's no game where I've watched Indiana where I'm just like, oh, they can't do anything in here. Like I used to think that the Bucks matchup was that, like, oh, they can't do anything with Giannis, but they play so fast. Like they give the Bucks fits. They always play the Celtics close, unless it's one of those games where it's like Boston just making all their threes, right?
Yeah.
And even
So
the Cavs,
that's
like,
only 150 win team for Denver to beat in that playoff
yeah,
stretch,
that's
huh?
one. Hey, they
There's
haven't beat
one.
one yet. So
Yeah.
there's your 50-win team with OKC. It's also
There you
like
go.
they might end up being a 70-win team. That should count for
NBA
like
Twitter would
double.
lose their minds if the Nuggets got the Pacers in the finals. They'd
The
lose their
other,
minds.
I would also be fine facing the Bucks. And
Yeah. So confident in that matchup. I don't know
I
why.
was so mad that we lost that Bucks game. I'm like, Denver, even in
That
your
was
diminished state, you should
yeah.
have beaten this team. Like that was a dumb loss.
That was one of the only games I like this season where I'm like, they were so much better than that team, but they lost.
Yeah.
They
I was like,
lost
what
for
are
some
you
reason. I
doing?
don't know why. Yeah, that was very weird.
Can't get out coached by Doc Rivers either. Like,
Yeah.
and then Boston, I think I would be okay with. I'm less confident in that matchup this year just because of my lack of confidence in Denver being able to consistently execute.
Yep.
And that's what you need to do against Boston. And I know like the Denver of old definitely could, but I'm worried about sort of late breakdowns in like key moments, like
Yeah,
the
that's
kinds of
fair.
things that you never expected in the past, where you're like, oh, they're definitely gonna like get over the hump here and like take that lead, or they're gonna, out execute them in the clutch. I'm not necessarily as confident about that, but that matchup, like, I feel they're capable of beating that team.
No, I like it. I like it. It's a good lineup.
For our outro, final segment, so I don't keep you away from your family for too long. We're just going to go over just some predictions for the next 7 games. The reason I went with 7 games is because the Nuggets actually have a really long homestand coming up after this road trip.
Okay.
And so I wanted to see what your thoughts were on how they do against these teams coming up. So All right, sweet. So the first game of this is Portland. So what do you think they're going to do on the road at Portland?
Well, I think it really depends on who you have available for this game, obviously. And I think for the next two games, Coach Malone hinted that Jokic could miss. He didn't say he would, but he hinted that he might. So we're not sure if we're going to get Jamal or Jokic in either of these games. I'm going to go out on a limb and say they win this game with or without Jokic. I think they can do it. I'm not like entirely confident, but they need this one. They need this one after dropping the LA game.
I've got this one as a W if Jamal plays. So not necessarily with Jokic, but I think if Jamal is back, they've got enough to, make it close enough and win it.
And Jamal scored 55 last time he played Portland.
That's true. I don't know if that's going to happen again, but they need offense in this matchup because the Blazers have been a much better defensive team lately.
Yeah, they're good.
So against the Rockets, then I've got this one as a win, but only if Jokic plays. It's definitely a loss if we don't have Jokic. The Rockets are too hot right now.
Yeah. Man, I don't know why I don't have a lot of confidence in this matchup. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if
this is one of your preferred matchups in round one.
Well, it's the playoffs, but this is still March basketball.
That's true.
This is still March basketball. So I think they probably lose this game at Houston. Houston's playing really well.
They are playing.
I mean, they might be on like a 9-game win streak.
One thing about this Nuggets team is we love to end other teams' winning streaks.
That is true. That's true. We've done it to the Kings like 4 times this year.
Yeah, and we did it to the Blazers. We did it to the Pistons. We did it to the Thunder.
That's right. It's true.
The only team we haven't like broken like a 5+ game winning streak of when we played them was the Cavs. Wow. That was like, oh no. They're like, nope, we're gonna keep this one going. Twice.
Good.
All right. So then versus Chicago. This is the first game of the homestand. And they did lose to the Bulls earlier this season. What do you think?
They're not gonna lose to the Bulls again. It's a win. It's a win at home.
That's what I said about the Wizards, but
this is a win at home. No more Zach LaVine going bonkers. I feel decent about this game.
I have this as a W as well. You can't get swept by the Wizards and the Bulls in the same season.
You should be eliminated from the playoffs if you lose to both those teams twice.
All right, next is versus Milwaukee. We talked about how we felt about this matchup and the disappointment from last game. So I've got this one as a W. I think even in a diminished capacity, like this team should be they should win this game, especially if everybody's healthy and active. I do think that this is the last like long homestand of the season, and I think they're going to really try to make a push to try to go on like a little streak here. So that's the other thing is I think they're trying to do that so that they can start resting more kind of extensively down the stretch.
Yeah, this is a big W for me. Michael Porter had the worst game of his career against Milwaukee last time they played. I just think he plays better in this matchup and doesn't get played off the court by Kyle Kuzma again, hopefully.
Yeah.
Just thing to do.
I'm gonna go with a W for Utah as well. Like there's just no way. Utah is so bad. Like they are so bad this year. This is not the Jazz of old that gave us, issues. This would be a really disappointing loss, especially at home. Probably the most disappointing loss of any team on here.
They've played really well against Utah all season. I don't think they should have any issues here. If Jokic is playing, if everyone's playing, I think that should be an easy W. I mean, Russ can lead them to a win in that game. They don't even need to play Jokic.
So the next game is Minnesota. Now, I had in my notes that this is a TNT game because I knew all the Wolves games this season were going to be on national TV, and the Nuggets have not fared well on ESPN games this year.
Yeah.
And my other rationale here is that they haven't gone 0-4 against a division opponent in a season since 2022. It was against the Jazz, so Rudy is involved in potentially 2 of those in the last 4 years. I think they're going to try to win this game. Like, I think they're going to play hard and whatnot. It might be close. And I'm kind of maybe banking on like
6 wins for Grace.
I'm kind of banking on the Timberwolves kind of cooling down. And maybe the last 2 games have shown that, like, okay, it's hard to keep up that level of play even in March basketball for too long. Yeah, in that game, it's like, okay, guys, you can like go 3-1 against Denver. You don't need to go 4-0 in a season. Like, let's just
there's no part of me that's confident.
I know. And they're going to be playing to probably still try to get out or stay out of the play-in at that point too.
For that reason, I think I'll probably say L. There's a good chance they do win this game, but I'll probably just, for prediction purposes.
Okay. I actually have it as a toss-up, so I took the coward's way out on my sheet, but Will doesn't let me.
You took the positive route.
Will doesn't let me take the tease anymore, so. Okay, and then the last game is the Spurs. Our old friends.
That's a pesky one, right? Well, De'Aaron Fox is out, right?
That's true.
But Mamu, he's awakened. He's awakened just in time to be a Nuggets killer. No, I mean, I think they very well should win this game. Like, they should win this game. Like, I feel pretty confident that they will win this game.
Okay. Won't be surprised if they lose that.
I feel good about that one.
Okay.
I feel good about that one. But like, the only other toss-up is the Milwaukee game, and then
that shouldn't be a toss-up. Like, that's one of those where I'm like, actually, after the Jazz, like, the Milwaukee game would be the most disappointing loss on this list.
I think the one I have as a W that I'm least confident in is the Portland game, just because Jokic might not play. But I believe in our guys. I believe they can pull out.
I just think they're going to push to close the homestand pretty strong. So I've got this as like a 5-2 to 7-0 kind of range, depending on.
That'd be great. That would be great. I mean, they're locked in at that point, at least.
Yeah.
For a
playoff spot at that point, they'll probably know that they're top 6.
That's not that bad. I mean, they still have hard games after this stretch remaining. But
that's true.
This is a stretch they need to definitely take advantage of, I think.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, speaking of the numbers, there has been a lot of talk over the last couple of weeks about what is going on with March basketball, particularly in the NBA, and whether the performances that we're seeing from certain teams, whether good or bad, are really real in the sense that you can take anything from them in terms of assessing the quality of a team, right? For example, the Cleveland Cavaliers, arguably the best team in the NBA right now, although I think that's still probably the Oklahoma City Thunder. But the Cavs have been right up there all year. They're currently on a 3-game losing streak, all to play-in teams, actually. Lost to Orlando, the Clippers, and then they lost to the Kings last night, right? What are your thoughts on Cleveland's recent slide and, what it says about how, like, even like the best teams can fall susceptible to the ails of March basketball?
Well, obviously they're cooked, right?
Yeah, they're done. They're done.
Yeah. Well,
it's their first 3-game losing streak of the season, by the way. And I think it was following the first time that they lost 2 games in a row.
Well, they were 54-10 before that.
Yeah.
So, it's when you think about it, it's like, oh, that is interesting. But it does make me think back to a couple years ago when Denver was, I think they were 7 games ahead of everybody else in the Western Conference, right? Yeah. Just putting it in perspective of a Nuggets fan, like I always do. And then I think they ended up losing 5 games in a row, and that was a big talking point. Like, oh, they're playing bad at the wrong time towards the end of the season, and it was March basketball, right? It ultimately did not matter in any way, shape, or form, and for Cleveland, and that for teams that are kind of set in their seeding, Oklahoma City, Cleveland, Boston, those teams are essentially done with this regular season. There is nothing out. There's nothing left for them to prove, in my opinion. Like, they should be trying as every single weird thing that they possibly can, rotation wise, strategy wise, trying to implement new sets. They should be trying everything and seeing if it works or if it doesn't work. But the results do not matter, in my opinion, for those teams. Now, on the other hand, you have your teams that are fighting for seedings who are also trying to balance like rest versus seeding, and that's a whole nother story in March, and it gets really complicated. But for me, for those top seeds, like, good for you. You've had a great season. Like, I don't think you have a whole lot to prove at this point in time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that about the Cavs. I actually have been saying for a while now, is they, even on their winning streak, they were going down double digits to all these mid-tier teams in all these games, and then making these like roaring comebacks or like winning in the clutch. There was a game against the Heat. There was a game against the Bulls. They really roared in the clutch. They were like down 6 and they ended up winning the game by 25 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And, to me, it's like, look, in my opinion, the Cavs have a really tough matchup on their hands in Boston, and they absolutely need all of their horses for that matchup. So I think it's time for them to start resting guys, making sure that everybody's fully 100% ready to give their all come playoff time.
Have they even been resting guys, though?
It's been kind of on and off. I'm not sure if they're resting guys. It's like Mobley will miss a game, and it might actually be for injury.
Yeah.
And Garland will miss a game, but I think it was actually for injury, and then he'll be back immediately. Right. And then everybody will be playing, and then, so...
Yeah, like last night
they haven't really pulled the
playing,
plug.
I think, but
yeah.
To your point, like, what are they?
The other thing
what
here,
what do they have to prove at this point, besides a franchise record in wins? Which,
right, exactly. I think that it's fair to say, like, look, for teams that haven't been there before, every like little milestone could mean something. So at one point, I thought maybe they're trying to get to that 70 wins. At this point, they would have to. I think after the Kings loss, maybe that's not possible. But maybe they want to try to go for a franchise record and show like, hey, we were the best team in franchise history, which I think by point differential, that's just true. But
it is. It is true.
Can I actually when I was looking this up, I was pretty shocked. Like, I knew LeBron's 09 MVP season was insane, but he took that Cavs team to 66 wins. And yes, it's the Eastern Conference, like, whatever. 66 wins is 66 wins. That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
Categorically.
You did see a lot more teams have higher win totals, I feel like, in the 2000s era. Like,
so I looked it up.
Which is interesting.
66 is still, I think it's tied for like 8th most in terms of in NBA
I know
history.
The Spurs got to 67 a couple times. The Mavs had a 67 win season.
Getting above 65 is way less common now. Even the Boston Celtics last year were a historic team, and they didn't break 65. I think they were 64 wins, if I recall.
64 is still insane.
Yeah. The Thunder will probably do it, though.
Yeah, because they win with 30 even without their best 2 players.
I mean, yeah, or without their entire starting lineup.
Yeah, that team is so stacked.
Yeah, the last year Celtics were a 64 win team. Like, it's really hard to crack 65 generally, but even more so these days, it seems like. But so on one hand, like, I kind of get that, especially for such a young team. They're just like, well, we're good enough. We should be able to do it. But I think that a team as good as they are should really try to keep their eyes on the prize, which is a title. Because I think they are good enough to win a title, theoretically. Like with some luck, like, you don't know. Maybe maybe Boston gets taken out by somebody else, or maybe you have a series where you have like insane shooting luck, which against the Celtics could mean like blowouts because the Celtics are built on shooting luck.
It's tough. It's tough to trust Cleveland just because they haven't done it before, right? It's tough to trust any team that hasn't done it before in the playoffs. Where, I mean, really that it shouldn't matter as much as it does, because a team has to do it eventually the first time. They have to. I mean, that's how it works, right? And nobody really ever feared Denver. Nobody really ever feared Milwaukee. They were winning 60 plus games for, I think, maybe the season before they won the championship, and and people were still writing them off, right? So I think they have a chance. I think Boston's really good, though. It's gonna be interesting for sure. No one else can beat Cleveland, though, in the East. There's not a chance.
Yeah,
I don't think so. New York, is New York gonna beat them?
No. I think the Cavs are as bad a matchup for New York as they are a bad matchup for the Nuggets.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. They can't guard him. All right. So another team that has seen some anomalous results lately are the Houston Rockets, who, well, that's kind of crazy. They were one of the best teams in the NBA at one point this season. Yes, they were second in the Western Conference in early January, and then proceeded to go on one of the most precipitous falls I've ever seen for a top seed at that point in the season, including a 6-game losing streak.
Not during fake March, by the way.
No, not during fake March. This was in January. It was almost immediately after they hit the peak, right? Almost immediately after they got that big win against us when we didn't have Jokic. They managed to stabilize, and then over the last week or so, they've been able to climb their way back up to second in the Western Conference, in the midst of this 2 through 5 rodeo going on between Denver, LA, Houston, and Memphis.
Yeah.
Including 8 straight wins. So they are now the hottest team in the NBA. What do you think about, what do you make of Houston right now at this point in the season? Just because their season has been like so up and down.
Yeah, Houston they're another team that I think if you're looking to kind of fix your matchup in the playoffs, I think Houston is at the top of the list for a lot of teams for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason being Jalen Green. I think
he hasn't even really been part of like this recent winning streak. Like, he's been playing, but he has not been playing well. Like, he has kind of reverted.
He had an insane stretch in the middle of the season where he was absolutely torching every single team. I mean, he was scoring 30 consistently for
efficiently
a couple weeks, over 40% from 3. And then he kind of fell off again. And then, they also were missing Fred VanVleet for a while when they were struggling. And I think he's kind of that veteran presence for them that is a lot more valuable than people give him credit for. But, Houston is just interesting because they're so young. They're so inexperienced. They don't have a single playoff game played with this group of players, and so it's historically, and I think it's important to look at historical context for teams like this. Historically, teams like this do not perform well in the playoffs. So I also want to point out, like, yes, they're on an 8-game winning streak, but those teams are Pelicans, Magic, Suns, Mavs, Bulls, Sixers, Magic.
Yeah.
So we've seen Denver have a similar streak earlier this year, and it ended up not meaning that much when they started playing better teams, right? I think a lot of people were really high on them after they had won 9 straight. They started playing really, above 500 teams for a long stretch, and they haven't performed nearly as well. So, like, those are kind of the biggest concerns I have for Houston, is like, just historically, you're going to be playing a lot of guys that are under 25 that haven't had any playoff experience. I mean, Fred VanVleet obviously is the exception there. He's won a championship. Like, maybe he could be the Chauncey Billups for the team and kind of lead them through the trenches and get them maybe past the first round. But I think second round is probably their ceiling this year, and they're gonna just keep getting better though. So they're definitely a team to watch for the future.
Yeah, for sure. Dramatic turnaround under Ime, and then bringing in those vets in.
Yeah, Ime's awesome too. Yeah, he just has him playing hard every single night and playing the
every
right way.
night.
Yeah,
it's annoying.
It is. It's annoying
to play them.
Dylan Brooks is another, like, he's
Fred and Dylan is what I was going to say, and Jeff Green, right? Like, they were just like, we need serious voices in the room because that franchise was a hot mess before they like started using their salary cap.
How about Reed Shepherd just absolutely being a complete non-factor as a top 3 pick?
Yeah, I mean, we saw this draft. I mean, Reese Shea was the number 1 pick in this draft.
Yeah, he's like a good role player at best, right?
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Reed, I think it's different for point guards. They always take a little bit more time to come along in the NBA, especially smaller point guards, unless you're Chris Paul, who was just amazing. Like, he just like came out of the womb like one of the best, most efficient playmakers in NBA history. But most others take time to develop. We saw that with Scoot Henderson, who started to come online a little bit more this season as well, after he was one of the worst players in the NBA last year. Just like
he's been better. He's definitely
been better. At least not like he's not like the negative that he was last year.
I'm just gonna say I saw Reed Shepherd play in the March Madness tournament last year and struggle mightily. There's just no way I would have picked him that high if I'm an NBA team after.
It's like,
even though it's just one game, it's like he's clearly not quite physically there yet. So I'm really interested to see if he can bounce back and be an NBA player, like an effective NBA player as a 3rd pick. That's crazy.
Yeah.
They're gonna have another lottery pick most likely this next year as well.
Do they have someone else's pick?
Yeah, they have someone. I can't remember whose it is. I think it's a lower lottery pick though. It might be Dallas. Is it Dallas?
From what deal is that? Let me see.
Like,
they have a swap with OKC, so they're going to keep that pick, and then they have Phoenix.
Phoenix, that's what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of those.
They got those picks in the Nets deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got Phoenix by the neck right now. This summer is definitely going to be interesting.
Phoenix is going to try and trade them KD as hard as they possibly can this summer for all those picks back. I
think they want Booker.
You think they want Booker?
Yeah.
I guess there have been reports that they're interested there. I don't know. I don't think Booker really wants to leave. We'll see. I guess he doesn't really have a choice.
Well, I don't think Phoenix wants to trade him is the other thing. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Well, thank you so much for giving us all of this time on the show. We really appreciate it. This was a really fun conversation. Is there anything that you want to tell the audience about where they can find you and your thoughts online or any of the other content that you produce?
I mean, you might know my Twitter page. It's just SportShorts at Denver Shorts. I live tweet. If you like live tweeters, they're pretty unfiltered sometimes. I delete tweets often. So if you like stats and just like following the Nuggets and all that, go follow me there. I have a very new podcast. It's just the SportShorts podcast. You can go. We do video podcasts on YouTube. We also you can go listen to it on Spotify as well. I think those are the only ones we have it on as of now. And they're just fun conversations. They're not. We don't take ourselves too seriously. We're emotional Nuggets fans, and we like to talk about the Nuggets. So you can go check that out. But yeah, that's about it for me. That's nothing crazy. But it's been awesome to be on the show. I watched a lot of your guys' episodes, and I think you guys are trailblazers in this like new media nugget space.
I didn't know about that.
No, I really do. I want to give you guys your props because I think you guys have had a really positive influence in helping others to kind of come out of their shell and talk about the Nuggets and share their thoughts. And I think you guys have definitely inspired me. So appreciate all that you guys do.
I appreciate that. You hear that, you guys? That's why you should help us grow the channel by remembering to click the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Subscribe now, hit the button, and hit that notification bell. You can also leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or anywhere you get your podcasts. We have all of our social links in the description, TikTok, and Instagram. And check out our clip channel as well. I should probably post some more clips there often. But, always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks, especially to the Lakers, because those fans are so annoying since they've merged with Luka Doncic stance.
Yes, it's a nightmare. Absolute nightmare.